Hello, everybody, and welcome. I would like you to introduce you to my guest today, authors of amazing book, Holding the Knife's Edge, The Journey of Black Female Scientists. And here with me today are Dr. Thato Motlhalamme and Dr. Evodia Setati. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you for having us.
No, it's wonderful. I mean, I feel so inspired when I heard about your book. It was out of the question that I have to interview you ladies, because I think it's an amazing book. And I think basically everybody should read it, actually, in science or not in science, because it is a great inspiration. So can you please tell me, why did you decide to write this book in the first place?
We never know who should answer this. So.
Okay, Thato, let's
we
start
always. So we've known each other for quite a number of years. We met in 2014. When I joined the university, Stellenbosch University, as a PhD student. Evodia was already working here at the time. So at some point, Evodia also registered for an MPhil in coaching, and through that process, I became one of her clients. And in our sessions, I kept talking about how I do not see visible examples of women like her who've build successful careers in science, and how we can learn from them, and how to build my career as a young scientist, because I was still busy with my PhD at that time. So we went back and forth and discussing this, and Evodia at that time was like, no, there are plenty of us you can really learn from. And when we sat down and really discussed this, she came up with the idea, and I will always say that she came up with this idea, that we, instead of just answering the question once off for me, we rather put together the information on women who look like us, who've built successful careers in science and different spheres of science. We never wanted to narrow it down to just the biological sciences that we were involved in. We wanted to have a broader scope, but put it together in such a way that it is a tool that's available to many young people in different places. So high school, early career scientists like myself, undergraduate students, parents, teachers. So we wanted a tool that was available, that could be widely disseminated, so that we can solve the problem of the lack of visibility of women in science, Black women in science specifically.
Absolutely. And maybe, Evodia, you can tell us, what are the biggest obstacles that female in science, and especially Black female in science, can face?
Well, I'll try and speak from my experience and from what I have heard from other people. Firstly, I think given the history of our country, for most Black people, communication in English is a challenge. I will start there. Of course, things are changing because people have Model C schools, people have English first language, and so on. So usually when you arrive at higher institutions, your confidence in communication is not at the level where people consider to be proficient, if I can put it that way. And often, especially for people who went to township schools, who went to historically Black institutions and so on, they arrive at the level of, let's say, being a master's student, PhD student, and even being a postdoctoral fellow, or starting your career, be it in academia or in industry, being very good scientists, but not necessarily very fluent in how they communicate in English or in their science. And for most Black female or just Black scientists in general, people tend to judge you on the basis of how you communicate. You can have a very brilliant French scientist or, Spanish scientist or Italian scientist that gets a job in South Africa and cannot really communicate fluently in English, and that gets forgiven quite easily. That is not the same consideration that is meted towards Black South Africans or Black Africans, and in particular Black female scientists. So you are immediately reduced to not being a good scientist on the basis of the quality of your English. That's the first obstacle. And obviously, if you're sitting in an audience where your peers and your colleagues look down upon you, it's a steep mountain to climb to convince people that you're a good scientist when people, disregard you on the basis of language. That's the first thing. Secondly, by you being a woman, you already have a lot of demands on you. So some people start their careers and start family all at the same time, and they have to now try and balance, it's work-life balance that is not necessarily equivalent to what the male counterparts would experience, right?
Yes. We're all females here, so yeah.
Yes. So often you will find women who have started their career and stop to focus on family and then come back. And when you come back, you are measured with the same tools as the male counterparts. Your frequency of publications, your H index or whatever index that is being measured. Nobody says, oh, by the way, but you were away for 5 years having children. So these kind of challenges, I always find that women tend to encounter a lot, where they have to come back and now try to catch up to the male counterparts who have never had the disruptions that they have had. So these are just some of the key examples, but not all the examples. For most Black women, just me being in natural short hair, I'm measured in a different way from a white female straight hair, lipstick on. And those are not important criteria in science or anywhere else for that matter.
No, absolutely.
But they matter. If we are honest, they matter. I can be looked at and people immediately think, oh my God, if she's looking like that, there cannot be much happening inside the brain. So yeah, those are just some of them.
Yes, I would like to actually add on top of that, because from what you're saying, like, people look at you when you're presenting your data, and I'm final year PhD student at the moment, and there is always this imposter syndrome already sneaking in, like, all those professors are looking and judging, and do I even speak the correct things? Do I get the right conclusions? And then on top of that, those are other additional factors, like you're saying, the language barrier, the obligations that you have towards your family, your culture. I noticed as well here, being in South Africa, some of the male counterparts could leave their children behind and their wives would take care of them while they could proceed with their careers. So that was also a different culture than for females. Yeah. But absolutely. So your book describes a journey of plenty of women that made their own path in building their careers from different backgrounds and very disadvantaged starting points, but they still managed to push through. So do you have your own personal stories that also relate to that? Can we find them in this book?
We chose to make the book really about other women. We connect, I think I can speak for both of us, we connect with a lot of the stories that these women have, or the journeys that these women have traveled, but it was never a focus on us as the authors of the book. We were giving other phenomenal scientists, female scientists, a canvas to showcase that no matter what your journey is and where you end up in your career, nothing precludes you from success. So whether it be rural upbringing where you might have had a late start in schooling, to interruptions with having family, to sexist, racist discrimination. No matter what the challenges you come across in your life, if you are focused in what you want to achieve, you will always achieve all those goals you've set for yourself.
Yeah, and I think I can just add here, I think the difference is this book, the women in this book didn't write their stories. So the approach to this book was that we interviewed them, and then we wrote the stories and the way we wanted to put the message across. And I think it was a bit of a difficult thing for us, because it would have been like us writing a memoir or autobiography, and I think we wanted to avoid, because if we have already seen and interpreted what the other ladies are saying, I think that then you have to work very hard to really not follow the same line that their stories are. Like, you have to try, you have to bracket yourself from the influences of how their stories have panned out. And this would have been difficult. I think if we were to put our stories in the book, then we would have needed somebody else to interview us and then write the story.
I see.
Yes.
No, absolutely. But so, for instance, do you have any examples of scientists that you choose as your favorites? Well, maybe I shouldn't say favorites in the book, but very inspirational examples that you remember from your book that you would like to share as like a promotion of your book?
Yeah, so I will try to pick from because the age, there's somewhat of a age delimitation, if I can say in the book. So you have a group of women who came up during the apartheid era and established themselves through those times. And then you have the younger people who, started their, tertiary education even post 1994. So for me, firstly, when I look at someone like Professor Tebello Nyokong, who is at Rhodes University, Rhodes is not one of those institutions that come up on the mention. Whenever people talk about the top universities in South Africa, you hardly hear of Rhodes University. I think most people even don't know where Rhodes University is. And someone like Professor Tebello Nyokong has established a world-class facility. She was there at the beginnings of nanotechnology as a chemist, and she's a world-renowned chemist. And this is somebody who, in the early years, she was herding sheep, in her grandparents' sheep. This is somebody who has had to move between South Africa and Lesotho, so between her maternal and paternal grandparents, to make her education life work. And this was during apartheid. This was a time when parents didn't think that a girl child needs to go too far in their education. But she was born into a family where her father didn't, think, oh no, girls cannot get educated, and girls this and girls that and boys this. So for her, I think she's somebody who got inspired by her natural environment, herding sheep, growing up with her grandparents, challenges of just being a girl child. And she pulled it throughout apartheid, working with men, and she is who she is today. And she's one of the people that we actually sat down with physically to interview, and just being in her space is amazing. So for me, she's somebody who I look at her and I go, wow, yeah, it wasn't easy times, but if you go around the world and you mention her name amongst chemists, they will know who she is. If I look at the younger people, someone like Patience Tunzi Kufa, who at one stage she was told that she shouldn't consider physics at all because as a Black person, there's no way she would build a successful career as a physicist, because that's just too much for our brain as Black people. And for her to have overcome those, when somebody says that to you, it works on your psyche. It pulls you down so far that for most people, you literally just go, okay, there's no way in life that I could be a physicist. But she didn't allow for that to control her life. She overcame that. And today she's a biophotonicist. And you go, what's biophotonics? And, so she didn't just end where people say, oh, no, I measured in physics. She actually specialized in a field that was still very much in infancy. And again, she's a leading biophotonicist. So for me, these are just examples on both ends where you look at people and you say, yeah, it's possible, Yeah.
No, absolutely. I read both stories as well, and I must say they're incredible stories. And that's what I would like to also ask you, ladies. What do you think about South African science when it comes to international arena? Do you think South African scientists, the facilities, can measure up to international arena?
Definitely. I think as the younger of the two, you mentioned something about imposter syndrome before traveling overseas. For me, and going to visit other labs overseas, you have this thing that we do not measure up. Our facilities are not the best, and the science that is done in Europe and America seems to be ahead of what we do. And once you visit labs overseas and interact with scientists overseas, you realize that in a lot of instances, we are ahead of the crowd in terms of the facilities that we have, in terms of the caliber of scientists that we have in the continent. We only suffer from stigmas that are not of our own doing as people on the African continent. Just because it's from Africa, it is already looked down a notch below average, but that is not the reality. And that is something that is very important, I think, for many young scientists, for many young researchers to get exposure to know that you are standing head and shoulders above, and if not on par, definitely above colleagues in the rest of the world. So it's not something that we should really be, we should be proud. We should be proud and stand tall, like Germans would stand tall and proud about German engineering. We should stand tall and proud about the types of research that we do on the African continent.
Yeah, I think Thato here touched on an important thing, because I think both of us benefited from opportunities to visit other laboratories, because in the second year of my master's and the first half, if not more than half of my PhD, I actually spent it in Sweden. I think I spent more time in Sweden than I did in South Africa for my master's and PhD. And I remember the first year that I went there, at some point, the person who was my co-supervisor had to explain to the whole group. We were quite an international group. We had somebody from Spain, from Italy, from Egypt, from Lithuania. We were quite an international group. But at some point, she had to explain to them, because she had been to our lab here in Stellenbosch, and I was getting so frustrated that she had to say to them, you will have to forgive Evodia, because she comes from those labs that are so organized. Everything is labeled. Every door is labeled in terms of what's behind the door. And I wasn't used to it. I had left South Africa thinking that where I'm going is going to be better than where I come from. And I got there and it was a nightmare for me, because every time I had to do something, I felt like, how is it that the systems are not working? Because I am used to certain order, and it was just, to me, it was confusion. I was like, no. I'm expecting you to be 1,000 times better than where I come from. And so I think the exposure of, leaving South Africa, being outside, is what really brings the awareness of what we have in South Africa. And some people do this. When we interviewed Professor Tebelo Nyokong, Manzai Diale, and so on, I think for them as well, because they have realized that until somebody leaves this country and goes elsewhere, they don't quite understand how lucky they are with the resources that they have. And so they also invest quite a lot of time using their collaborators to send their students, even if it's just for 3 months, to just experience other laboratories and get an understanding of what resources are available. Some people have to share small bench spaces. We are very privileged. If somebody is a meter close to you, you're like, you're encroaching on my space. And, so those kind of things people do not really realize. And it's just the exposure to the outside world that really helps you to appreciate what you have.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I agree. I'm international here, so I'm not from South Africa, and I've been here for 5 years. And I agree. The only problem working here in South Africa is actually just waiting for reagents to come from overseas. But besides that, I agree. We have great facilities here, and they should be used to promote it further and definitely keep up with the good science so that the next generations can come in. So what would be your message towards, let's say, high school students who are considering science as something that they want to pursue? What would be your message? Because I know that your book is promoting actually going for it, chasing the dream.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I think the first thing is to say there's no special person that is meant to do science. You excel in science if you're passionate about science. There's nothing that comes easy. You can take, for instance, athletes. Athletes have to train from morning, to late afternoon several times a day, have to, restrict their diets, limit their diets to certain types of food, and so on and so forth. So a person doesn't become an excellent athlete just by sitting around and saying, oh my God, I can't do 100 meters in so many seconds. They have to push themselves every day. When you say practice makes perfect, it really does. So it's the same thing when it comes to mathematics, when it comes to science. You have to push yourself to engage daily with the concepts that you consider to be challenging and difficult for you. You have to sit down. When I was at school, I could never sit down with one textbook. It never made sense to me. I would be sitting down with 4 textbooks, and in my head, I told myself, one of these will explain this concept a little bit better. So you have to, it's not going to just come to you. You have to say, okay, I'm struggling with ABCD. What are my channels? How can I make this better? And definitely investing time in the things that you would like to excel in will work for you. You can't choose the easy route. So for me, there's nothing that you cannot do. It's your mindset is what you're willing to invest in the process.
And I think just adding to what Evodia said, also be thoughtful and intentional in when you're in high school, the subjects that you select. You can't want to go into university to do engineering, but because in high school you chose the subjects that automatically exclude you from these from these career choices. Be mindful that even though you've got an easier maths option in South Africa, maths literacy, that you might be able to pass with much higher marks what are the downstream repercussions of choosing that level of mathematics as opposed to maths at higher grade or the standard grade? What are the different options? If you are in a high school that doesn't necessarily have career guidance, the world is very connected with the internet. Lots of young people have cell phones at their fingertips. Try and find out that I want to do a BSc. What are the university requirements that are needed for me to get access to this BSc? When I am studying and practicing my mathematics and revising my biology and chemistry, what is the minimum requirements in terms of marks that I need to get? The goal that I need to set for myself to get into these degree programs that I want to get into. So just always be intentional and try and figure out early enough where you need to position yourself in order to achieve the things that you want to achieve. So definitely not choosing the easy option, and it's always very easy to want to choose the easy option. Not choosing the easy option is a starting point.
So start with the finish in mind, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this interview. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate what you did with this book. I'll show it again to the audience. It's a great book. Buy it, no matter what level you are. If you have kids, if you are planning to have kids one day, read it, because it doesn't even focus only on Black female scientists. It's basically inspiration for anyone who wants to achieve something. And it emphasizes that no matter what was your start, if you are passionate and determined enough, you can get there. And that's the point. Start with the end in mind. And thank you again, ladies, so much. This book can be found on publisher.co.za and on Amazon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you so much, ladies, and have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martina, and have a lovely day too.